Hey, Thrive Loud listeners, Lou Diamond here. Continuing our special series here in February 22, where we are pulling in episodes from other programs where I've interviewed some amazing individuals that belong on Thrive Loud. You get to hear my interview from the Why They Listen podcast with legendary sports agent David Falk. You get to learn some incredible stories, great lessons. He's an unbelievable connector, and he's weaved his way and has been an integral part of the sports pantheon over the last several decades. I think this is a gentleman who truly, as the episode title is listed, is living the dream. So sit back and relax and enjoy this Throwback Thursday episode where I got a chance to sit down with David Falk.
You don't want the truth because deep down in places you don't talk about at parties, you want me on that wall. You need me on that wall. We use words like honor, code, loyalty. We use these words as a backbone of a life spent defending something. You use them as a punchline, just like Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond.
Want to learn from those that are taking their lives, their businesses, and their passions to the next level? Best-selling author of Master the Art of Connecting and professional speaker Lou Diamond is here to connect you to some of the most inspiring and amazing people on the planet. Get ready to thrive loud with Lou Diamond.
Today we have founder and CEO at Falk Associates Management Enterprises, known as FAME, a master connector, and arguably the most influential player agent the NBA has ever had. David Falk, welcome to the program. David, how are you today?
Delighted to be with you, Lou.
Before we go down memory lane, I want to catch up with you on projects and initiatives you're focused on right now. What are you doing here in 2020?
So I really have probably three principal hats. Hat number one, I have my sports agency, FAME, which is in the fourth quarter for certain. I don't plan to sign any more clients, but I'm going to certainly continue to work with the players I have, like Otto Porter, Gary Trent Jr., a few others, Coach Thompson. And my second hat is I'm an educator. I have my own, I endowed a college at Syracuse University called the Falk College of Sports and Human Dynamics, which we like to feel is the #1 sports management program in the country. And I've also endowed a program at GW Law School called the Falk Academy of Management and Entrepreneurship, where I teach negotiations and entrepreneurship as the curriculum builds. And then my third hat as a serial entrepreneur, I'm an investor and in many cases a strategic advisor to about a dozen companies in different fields, digital marketing, real estate. One is a company that has reinvented the toaster called Revolution.
It heats things up, Pastor. I'm familiar with it. That's pretty cool. Yeah.
Aimcast, which is a really interesting digital company. And I really enjoy the challenge of trying to both use my expertise and connections in business to marry people together that I think can help each other grow, and to do some general marketing consulting. I have one amazing company called Ostendo, which has become the next Intel, currently valued at about $1.8 billion.
Wow.
So that's been a great challenge to try to feel like I'm not an idiot savant in sports.
As you can tell right out of the gate, David is passionate about these hats he wears. Seen now as a keen investor, entrepreneur, philanthropist, and educator, David's early part of his career has positioned him in history as an integral part of the sports landscape for 40 years. As an agent for over 100 NBA players, most notably Michael Jordan, he's been considered one of the most powerful people in sports. Representing the best and connecting the key players has been his forte. Let's get back to the conversation. I'm gonna hit a point here. By the way, it's later in the year, but happy birthday! I know you kick off every year January 1st. You turn 70 this year.
August.
Yeah, and we're moving along here. And in April, when COVID was in its flux, I sat down with my son and was incredibly eagerly excited as they moved up the start of The Last Dance. And it was really interesting. Before we got a chance to do this interview, I got real excited because when I watched it, I thought it was one of the most thorough jobs of I remembered living through it, but obviously as a viewer. What I wanted to ask you, I guess, is just as a summary, what personally stood out the most about that documentary for you?
I'd say simply the fact that knowing Michael as intimately as I do from day one, I think it showed the public an insider view of what made him the greatest player of all time. It wasn't his jumping ability, it wasn't his shooting ability, it wasn't his dunking ability. It was his cerebral approach to the game, both in terms of knowing, he probably knew the competition better than any scout in the NBA. And he was able to put himself in a certain mental state of competition, regardless of how tired he was, regardless of how late in the season it was, how little a game might have met. And that's what truly makes the great ones great, is the mental part.
Yeah. You obviously were featured in it a bunch of times, which was great. I think the thing I learned was I never knew about all the practice games going on when they were filming a movie that you executive produced, Space Jam. Could talk a little bit about that, because obviously you had a lot of your clients who were featured in the movie, but what an unbelievable thing. People were coming down to the studio to go play with him. I never knew that. That was pretty cool.
Well, I was the executive producer of Space Jam. It was my idea. I enlisted the help of a very dear friend of mine, Ken Ross, who works at CBS in music and television. And I think a lot of times when you get into a new field, people have a tendency to feel they have to act like they really know what's going on. Now, I'd never been involved in the movie business. I went up to Terry Semel and Bob Daly, who were the chairman of Warner Brothers, when they greenlighted the movie, and said, look, I have zero experience in movies. I have zero expertise in movies. I really need you to help me make this great, because it involves Michael. And they literally held my hand and walked me through the process. They were very generous with their time and their advice. And the movie came out amazing. Not only did it do unbelievable at the box office, but it did over $1 billion in retail sales and consumer marketing. My dear friend Dan Romanelli, who's the head of consumer marketing at Warner Brothers, maybe his greatest success. He had a lot to do with the film getting approved. And it sold 7 million copies of the CD. The music was amazing. So it was a really wonderful experience, but Michael was a one and done. He never wanted to do it again. That's why I was a little surprised I actually got him to do his interviews for The Last Dance, because the movie was very arduous to make a green screen movie, where you're there by yourself, no one else, and they're transposing everything on the green screen.
It is interesting. By the way, obviously Bugs continued to make movies, so obviously there was no problems on set there. I did notice something, by the way. You talked about those numbers and buying, whether it was the tapes or the DVDs. I have a 20-year-old son who watched that movie as a young kid. He is a Chicago Bulls fan because of Space Jam. He was not alive when Jordan played for the Bulls. And so I'm a struggling New York Knicks fan, so that's the most frustrating thing in the entire world. But I think I appreciated it, and just watching that moment in history, I'm like, oh, that was the moment right then and there that the fandom went out the window. But
I think the movie is incredibly popular today.
Yeah,
and I think it's kept Michael's image vibrant for a whole generation of kids that probably don't even know he played basketball. They associate me with the movie or with the fact he's the guy on the shoe on Air Jordan. And I think it's kept it vibrant. I was very surprised that LeBron agreed to do a sequel to the movie. The whole essence of Space Jam, we turned down over 100 offers to do movies because I wanted to make a movie custom made for Michael Jordan. And I'm a big LeBron fan, so I don't say this to be in any way to be critical, but if I were LeBron's advisor and I was shown 1 million movie titles and you asked me where I'd rank Space Jam 2, it'd be 1,000,001. I would never let him make Space Jam. And I'm sure the movies could be great, this could be fun, but it's Michael's movie. And
right.
I think LeBron is such a big star that he deserves his own movie.
I agree with that. This is going to be an interesting take here that I'm going to go with, because I thought this was fascinating. You have this, I'm going back in time. The first time I'd ever heard of David Falk, believe it or not, I was in college and a very good friend of mine interned at ProServ. He went to GW and he was interning there. Yeah, Scott Spielberger. We're giving him a shout out. And the boss's 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 boss was you. And I remembered when I heard it, and now when I saw it in The Last Dance in the documentary, I thought it was interesting that they highlighted that Michael picked to work with you because you were treating a team player like an individual player. And I want to start this conversation about branding, because when you started to connect with him on that, was that the message that you connected most with him about, or what resonated that got the two of you together?
I hate to tell a very boring story, but back in the day, the top basketball programs in the country were North Carolina with Dean Smith, Georgetown with John Thompson, Duke with Coach K, Indiana with Bob Knight, and Rick Pitino. And they allowed no recruiting of the players, zero. At the end of the year, you got 1 hour in the coach's office to meet the player and his family. It was like sort of making an argument before the Supreme Court. And Dean Smith would always say, the player selected you, but the players would tell you that Dean, quote, suggested that you were the best people for him. And if he didn't suggest that you were the best people, you could connect all you wanted, you'd never get him. So we had everyone from Carolina before Michael, literally. I could give you like a litany. We had Bobby Jones, 73, George Karl, and 77, Tom LeGard was the 9th pick in the draft, Phil Ford, National Player of the Year in 78, Dudley Bradley, 79, number 13, Michael Korn, New Jersey Nets, 80, number 6, Al Wood, number 4, Atlanta Hawks, and James Worthy, number 1. So I wouldn't say anything was guaranteed, but we had the best track record of performing for North Carolina players. And so I'm not sure that anything resonated with Michael except Dean's recommendation.
It turned out to work out well. This is something that this program is called Why They Listen. And normally we've been talking to people who are producing unique content that have been catered to a specific audience. When I had the opportunity to interview you, though, I had a different take on this. Players, coaches, parents of athletes, teams, GMs, marketers, brands, Hollywood, leaders, investors, all have been influenced by you. And people who are influenced obviously listen to that person. They listen to someone they're influenced. David, why do you think people listen to you?
Okay, so that's a great question and a great insight. I would say first, I think in the world of sports, essentially without saying egotistical, I was Warren Buffett. I was the best investor. So it wasn't how I dressed. It wasn't my personality. The players knew if you want to make money, David's the best at making money. In marketing, which I never took a single course in marketing, never was trained to be a marketer. I think I'm a creative person. And it was a challenge for me when I was young working at ProServ. There were 4 or 5 mega partners ahead of me, and I was trying to find my niche. And my niche turned out to be marketing. I had a skill for it. I think I learned. And I worked with so many incredibly gifted CEOs who would teach you. They would give you ideas of things about scarce. I'll give you an example. This came from sports. The guy who originally owned the Portland Trailblazers was named Lawrence Weinberg.
Right.
And he had a 12,000 seat arena. They won the NBA title in 1977.
Yep.
And it was so incredibly popular, Blazer Mania, that he had like thousands of people in a closed seat theater next door as if it was the arena. And I said, Lawrence, you're a construction guy. Why don't you build a bigger arena? And he said, like, are you dumb or stupid? He said, I have 12,000 fans, 11,000 season tickets. And you have to know in Portland, if you're not a season ticket holder, you're not going to be able to get in. If I built a 19,000 seat arena, I'd have 11,000 season ticket holders because everyone knows you could buy a ticket. It's called the Philosophy of Scarcity. Now, when I marketed Michael Jordan, I remembered that quote from Lawrence Weinberg, and I decided I was going to do a very select number of deals. And once we hit that number, no more deals. And so I learned a great deal from the different people, even though I wouldn't say I'm a great listener because I'm an impatient listener. I get the drift of where people are going and I want to go on to the next subject without being rude. But I think that I have a unique combination of being both analytical in terms of understanding the market in basketball, the economics of the game, I think I became an expert. I'm an economics major in college, and I try to understand the economic impact my clients would have both on the court and off the court. So when Michael was a rookie, we were asked to sign with this company called Ohio Art that makes the famous product that your kids had when they were 3 called Etch-a-Sketch. And they made foam balls, Nerf balls, and toy backboards with Dr. J and Larry Bird. One of them made $10,000 a year against royalties, and the other made $50,000 and no royalties. So they wanted to sign Jordan to be the third guy. And I said, make me an offer of 6 figures. We'll consider it. I said, you must be out of your mind. 6 figures, I'm not paying that to 2 of the greatest players ever. And I'm enormous fans of Dr. J and Larry Bird. Know them both extremely well. 2 classy guys. And I told him, look, if all you want is Bird, Dr. J, you got him. If you want Jordan, it's going to cost you 6 figures. Now, it turned out he sold a lot more products than Dr. J or Larry Bird, even though they were Hall of Fame legends. And so, I embrace the philosophy of scarcity. And you have to believe if you have a good product. I'm sitting here in front of the beach of Key Island, where the land costs as much as Malibu, California.
Right.
Why? There's only so much beachfront property in America. It's got a high value. There's only so many people that can move the needle, like a Jordan or a Tiger Woods or a Pelé. And you've got to be really disciplined and hold it back until you get what you think you deserve, or you get underpriced it. You mentioned Magic Johnson earlier.
Yeah.
Magic is an amazing player, an amazing personality, and he's become an incredibly successful businessman, but he didn't have good representation. And he gave his career away for $1 million a year. And I feel badly for him because he deserved way more. I guess he's made it up, so I give him a lot of credit. But you have to know when you're representing Magic Johnson, how many 6'9" point guards are there in the world? One.
Right. David, it's interesting because I think as I'm listening to you, obviously your well-rounded knowledge and expertise in certain areas instills a confidence and maybe even an assertiveness that people will hear what these issues are. So I'm going to flip this around. When you're listening to your clients, the people you've represented, how are you asking them really for what they want? Is it always going to be about the dollar, or is it maybe about something bigger? How do you decode what you hear from your clients so that you can then use that when you go represent them in the best way you can?
Okay, without sounding totally disrespectful, when you're signing young people who are 18 to 21 years old, and they can be really smart, they really don't know what they want. And so my job is not to ask them, what do you want? It's to educate them, what are the options? And then to make recommendations of what options I think are most conducive to their success. They've got to sign off on it. I think most agents pander to their clients. And my job is to be, if you ask Michael Jordan what the single most valuable thing I did for him in 20 years, he would tell him is to teach him the business of sports. And that's the greatest compliment he could pay me. So I talk to them and I discuss with them, but to ask someone a question that they don't really have a good handle on the answer is really an exercise in futility. And so I always looked at my job more than being a deal maker. My job was to educate my clients so that they could make good decisions. And when they finished playing, that they'd be successful outside the world of sports in whatever field. And I'm very proud to say that I look at people like Elton Brand, who's running the Philadelphia 76ers, Michael, who's got the most successful shoe business, got a great franchise in Charlotte, Tommy Amaker is coaching at Harvard, Johnny Dawkins is coaching at Central Florida, Juwan Howard is at Michigan. Dikembe has done amazingly well in business. Really, really proud of the John Paxson, who ran the Bulls for many years. And you'd like to think that, beyond simply making them money, and that you've enabled them to make good decisions for the rest of their lives when they go into business at age 30. Most of us don't get into business. And these guys, it's career number 2.
David, it just occurred to me as you shared with the listeners here, your passion for education with what you're doing at Syracuse and at GW, the way you've always educated and been a teacher to your clients, And now in the role that you're in now as an advisor and an investor, which sits on both sides there, that you are really trying to provide the guidance and understanding the market at play, the situations around you. It's this ability to basically, you're creating multiple classrooms and creating an environment for people to listen and really take advantage of it. I think that's where your superpowers seem to come through. Do you agree with me on that?
Yes. I have to say, the reason that education is so important to me is that my mother, Pearl Falk, was a teacher. She was a highly educated woman. She graduated college at 19. She got 2 master's degrees. She spoke 8 languages. And she was my mentor. She was my life's mentor. And when I became successful in business, instead of trying to save the Amazon deforestation or provide clean water in Africa, I wanted to use my influence in education to honor my mother. And so, I know she's looking down. When I see the name Falk at Syracuse University, Falk College, like that's the greatest way that I can honor my mother.
That's great. Love it. There's no way in the world I can get out of this conversation with you without asking a question, because I shared with you, obviously, that I grew up in New York and I'm a Knicks fan. And and perfectly fit for the name of the show, Why They Listen. How were you able to put together the contract for Patrick Ewing, enabling him to, as I think, and I might be right, to be in the top 5 players during a certain window of time? How were you able to pull this off? It's been on my list of I gotta ask him. So please.
First of all, when he signed his rookie contract on September 20th, 1985,
right,
he was the highest paid player in the history of the league by 55%. Not the highest paid rookie. He made 55% more than Kareem, who was the highest paid player of all time. And we signed him for 10 years, fully guaranteed. And I was very worried that despite the fact that it was so high, that the market was changing so quickly, that the contract would not stand the test of time. So I invented a concept, which is now called an ETO, an early termination option. And I made the Knicks agree that if he weren't one of the top 4 highest paid players in the league, that we could terminate the deal. And ironically, and very few people know this, at the end of the 6th year, he wasn't one of the 4 highest. So we exercised the option. The league objected. And Gary Bettman, who I love to death, who is now the commissioner of the NHL, manipulated Larry Bird's contract, which is for 1 year for $6 million. The trigger was 3. And he made him sign a deal with a $2.8 million salary and a $3.2 million signing bonus to argue that his salary, the trigger was the salary. And there's no difference in a contract, in a 1-year contract, whether you call it salary or signing bonus. Get paid the same time, it's fully guaranteed. But they used that fiction to win the case. And after they won the case, Dave Checkis, who I'm a huge fan of, was savvy enough to know you really can't win the case against Patrick. He should have been free. And he signed to a 2-year extension at $12.2 million.
Right.
He didn't have to do that. And he and Pat Riley, 2 people I have great admiration for, got together and they understood the human psyche, that if they held the line, you don't win anything with a great player like that. So they stepped up to the plate and made him the highest paid player again.
Spectacular. I just love it because when I read the story and heard it, now hearing it from you, I just can only imagine, like, when people were writing about this and we were reading about it as a fan, I'm like, how did this get done? But go you on putting it that way.
I got to just add one more. The funny part of the story was that I signed Patrick myself. He was the first, came a year after Michael.
Right.
I didn't bring my boss in, who was the chairman of the company. John Thompson wanted me to do it. It was his way of imbuing me. He felt I had arrived. I'd done a good enough job with other clients at Georgetown. And my boss called me in and said, have you given any thought to what you want to ask for Patrick? Knowing that the highest paid rookie had ever was making just over $1 million. And I thought about it day and night for a month. And I decided I was going to ask for $3 million a year for 10 years. And he basically told me that I must be spoken something I was supposed to be spoken. that he was going to laugh when the Knicks threw me into the office. And sure enough, we go up there. And he must have tipped him off, because the Knicks said, David, you must be on crack or something to ask for this much money for a rookie. And I say, look, no problem. You've had 2 great back-to-back years before Patrick got here. You won 24 games one year and 22 games the other year. So if you don't think it's fair, I won't be angry. We'll just go back to school at Georgetown for 1 year, get a graduate degree, and Patrick will go back in the draft and be drafted by another team. And you can explain to the fans in New York why Gulf and Western, the richest company that owned a team, couldn't afford to pay fair market value for Patrick Ewing. And we waited them out all summer, and we had all the leverage. It wasn't like a question of being difficult. He had all the leverage. The Knicks absolutely had to sign Patrick Ewing, absolutely, at any price. And the irony is that in between the time they won the lottery, 45 days before the draft, and the time that they drafted him, the Knicks sold $6 million worth of new season tickets.
Yeah,
so right. I thought in the aftermath, we probably didn't ask for enough money. We probably should ask for $5 million a year.
Well, look, I think what's great about all of this is you were an early trusted advisor, I think, throughout your life. And that's one of the roles of, I guess, being an agent. And maybe more importantly, the ability to connect, not just in the sport they're in, but outside of it in different businesses. It's catered so well for you right now in your, this fourth, I love how you said you're in the agencies in the fourth quarter and you got all these other investments and new businesses. You put that hat on. What's next? What's the thing you're looking forward to that we don't know about here? Anything that's coming down the horizon that you're excited about?
I'll tell you something, and I said this half seriously and half in jest, but when you work in the world of sports, everything you do is public. So if you sign Patrick for that deal or you sign Jordan, a group of people say, God, how could you on earth think that a basketball player could be worth that kind of money? And the other half will say, God, $3 million? My daughter could have gotten him $6 million. So you get criticized both. And all these people who know nothing about the internal dynamics that shape the decisions you're making, they're all critics. And so John Thompson taught me when I was about 35, just shut them off and ignore them. Don't worry what people think. Do what you think is best. Just worry what your clients think. Are they happy? And so my hope is that one of these businesses that I'm in becomes worth like $1 billion. And when I do the press conference announcing my involvement, I'm going to say, I don't have any clue how I was able to do this without all you Monday morning quarterbacks telling me I was too greedy, I was too short-sighted, I was too aggressive, I was too passive. I don't know how I was, and I say that half in jest because I really don't care. The criticism I completely ignore. But you have to be a little thick-skinned.
Yeah.
You have the team battling you, and these are really smart people, the billionaire owners, trained GMs. You have your client you have to please, and all the people around who have unrealistic expectations, and you try to please yourself. It's a lot of pressure, and you have to learn how to balance all the different interests in order to do your job, or the pressure would just, sink you.
You've been successful with it, and I bring it back to this. I think the reality is that you create lessons out of each of these stories, and whether you know it or not, you are part of the lore of the business of these sports in the time of your career, and that is a lesson in itself, which is pretty cool. And people at Syracuse are going to take advantage of that.
I would say my lesson to your listeners is, I was very fortunate to do the one job I always wanted to do. I always wanted to be a lawyer, and I wanted to be in sports. And so for the last 47 years, I've lived my dream. And not only was I in the game, but I was in the game at the absolute highest level with amazing people like Michael, Patrick, Elton Brand, Juwan Howard, John Lucas, John Thompson, Coach K, probably like John Stockton, Dominic Wilkins. It doesn't get any better than that. And so I lived my dream. And my biggest pressure was feeling that I could live up to the responsibility that they gave me to manage not only their careers, but their lives. And the fact that all the years later, that John Lucas and Phil Ford from the 70s, and Michael and Patrick from the 80s, and Elton was like my little brother, and Juwan from the 90s, John Thompson for all these years, these are lifelong friends.
Yeah.
And that is the ultimate, the meaning of that to me is beyond description, because I'm a relationship nut. And I'm grateful and gratified that was just not dollars and cents. It wasn't simply business. It was very personal for me. And I'm beyond grateful that they stood by me and made me who I am.
David Falk, truly an honor and a pleasure to have you on the program.
Really enjoyed it. Great questions.
You've been listening to Thrive Loud with your host, Lou Diamond. Check us out on the web at thriveloud.com and follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook at Thrive Loud. And check us out on the Good Pods app at Thrive Loud, where you can follow, listen, and connect directly to Lou and all of the Thrive Loud episodes. Thanks for listening.